Pat, it is Good Friday, and as is a tradition here on Kicking the Seat, we're going to be talking about a religious-themed movie, and we might be talking about one of the biggest, certainly one of the longest, today. Celebrating 60 years, it is The Greatest Story Ever Told, which came out in 1965, and I honestly had always thought of this as a TV movie. I'd never
Ah,
seen it before. I
yeah,
might be thinking of Jesus of Nazareth or something, but
yeah.
yeah, this was a blind spot for me. Max von Sydow as Jesus Christ. And an all-star cast, or a lot of stars in the cast, including Telly Savalas as Pontius Pilate.
Who loves you, Jesus?
None
And
of the
wait,
people,
and Max von
but
Sydow, Swedish Christ superstar.
oh no, that is not going to be the title of this episode, but I'm tempted. Um, much as Jesus was by Donald Pleasance, also playing the devil. Wow.
Yeah,
So, Pat,
it's
tell me about your experience of with this movie. Yeah, I imagine you were too young to appreciate this when it was on TV initially,
yeah.
but did you, or
Well,
not TV, but in theaters or certainly on reruns? How did you catch up with it?
interestingly enough, I had encountered it several times over the years. It was an Easter time favorite on various stations, whether network or the 10:30 movie or whatever you wanted to call it. So I've encountered it, you know. And first off, I want to say it's not a good Friday, it's a great Friday. So
Yes.
so what so I've seen it over the years. I knew that Max von Sydow had played Swedish Christ superstar, and I didn't and I knew of its reputation, but I've never sat down and watched the whole thing from beginning to end, the long beginning to the long end. So it
Yeah.
was a real pleasure. And the print that we found online, I don't know if you watched the same one, but it was in full 70 millimeter. It was beautiful.
No. Where did you find this?
On the Internet Archive, I gave you the link.
Oh my gosh, I totally missed that in like all of the links and the messaging and the
Yeah,
scrubbing.
yeah.
No, I I you remind me now that yes, you did say, and I'll have to watch this again because
Mm,
I watched it in the awful 4:3 aspect ratio. I rented it off Amazon. Um,
terrible.
and I think that's why it was stuck in my head as being a TV movie because it was,
Right.
very boxed in. Um, but hey, it's not necessarily the presentation, it's the content. And,
Oh,
what a lot
absolutely.
of content.
Absolutely. I took a picture of the screen at one point because the crucifixion and the Last Supper look like paintings in this 70 millimeter rendering. And again, I'll send you the link. It's gorgeous. You have to at least watch a few scenes, because the scope of the movie really became front and center for me because of the aspect ratio I watched it in.
Now I have to ask you this question
Yes,
because
sir.
I was doing some research afterwards, looking at trivia and things.
Yeah.
Um, which cut did you watch? Did you watch the
I
four
watched
hour and 20-minute version?
Interesting. I watched what I presume was the latest DVD rendering. I think the person who downloaded this on the Internet Archive had taken it from the DVD because it was a flawless transfer, and thus it was 3 hours and 20 minutes. So, what was your version?
I watched it was 3 hours and 13 minutes.
Okay, same,
But
same, yeah.
okay. But yeah, looking it up, apparently the original theatrical cut of this was 420,
For
which
420,
is,
baby. Yeah.
appropriate. Yeah.
Exactly, because you're going to need 420 to get through that 3.5 hours or the 4 hours. But there
But
were no
it's
legalities in those days. Go ahead.
it's interesting because knowing that it's weird because now I know that there is a pristine version because the version I watched was all fuzzy and not
Uh,
restored or anything, and it was in 4:3. So I feel like if I didn't love the movie all around, I would have been much more miserable talking about it. Now I have an excuse to go back and watch it again. But I will say that might answer some of my questions about the narrative
right.
because there's a long preamble just kind of setting up the world in which Jesus was born. And when we finally see him, we see him be born and then we cut to him as an adult. There's nothing about him being a child, or
Well,
because in scripture it goes from like, that's the old joke, is like he's 13 and then he's 33. In this one, he's 3 minutes old and then he's 33. You're saying that they showed some of his childhood, because the version I
yeah,
watched, he was born and he was a baby they travel a little bit, but there was nothing about his childhood or his young adulthood. But you said that there was something involving him as an infant.
right. Because Herod gave the order to kill every, I guess, firstborn son to try to kill Jesus. And you see Mary and Joseph escaping. I believe they went to Egypt, if I know my Bible studies, and I don't. So then you see they come upon a crucifixion. There's like a dozen guys being crucified, which remind me of Life of Brian. But then the baby Jesus gazes upon the crucifixion scene. And I thought, who played the baby Jesus? And I couldn't find it in IMDb. I couldn't find it. So that's a mystery. Is he part of the Jesus curse? I don't know.
What is the Jesus curse?
The Jesus curse is that if you play Jesus, your career is going to have a downturn. Now, the exceptions to that rule is, of course, von Sydow. But I don't know much about his filmography, so I'd have to check it after he played Jesus. But also Victor Garber played him in Godspell and had a pretty good career afterward. But we're talking Jeffrey Hunter, who played him in Kings of Kings, another 1960s Jesus movie. Ted Neely, who played him in Superstar, didn't have much of a career afterward. And finally, Jim, was it Caviezel or
Caviezel? Yeah,
Caviezel. Jim Caviezel in Passion.
Well, and that's it's interesting, because I know, or at least I've read, that Caviezel is going to be back for the Resurrection, which is, I thought that was coming out this year somehow, but I guess it's next year. So I wonder what we'll be talking about next Easter. But so I think I did see that scene, but that was like shortly after he was born. But there's nothing about, because there is some Jesus of the early years from scripture, but we get none of that. So I'm wondering if any of that was left out when they chopped up the 4-hour plus version to make this one, because a lot of the rest of the movie seemed to track. There didn't seem to be any glaring omissions. Now, there were some mashups, which were kind of interesting. And I thought to myself, why condense these events if you've got 3+ hours to tell a story? And maybe this is nitpicking, but it's, when Jesus encounters John the Baptist, played greatly by Charlton Heston. I mean, at first I thought, oh man, Charlton Heston
blew it up.
Yes. But I expected him to be, just kind of cheesy and hamming it up.
Heston, hamming, right.
But he did have tremendous bluster, and his later scenes with Herod, some of the best stuff in the movie.
Yeah, I agree.
But when we first see Jesus talking to John the Baptist, they're down at the beach and he's baptizing people and everything. And then all of a sudden, Jesus kind of looks over and there's like 4 of the people who would be his apostles just like standing there. And he's like, yeah, come follow me. Like, no,
that was
like
weird.
Judas was in there. And like, there's a very specific sequence of events. It's almost like, hey, we're going to make an Avengers movie. And, Nick Fury walks into a room and just happens to see Captain America, the Hulk, and Black Widow sitting at the same, restaurant booth.
And he was played by David McCallum, I think, Judas. So he was the man from Uncle Judas, because he was playing the man from Uncle in those days.
Well, that's man. You've got names for everyone. I love it.
Well, I was astounded by the number of 1960s people in this film. I mean, it was closely followed, or It's a Mad World was right next to this film. So the WAGs were comparing it because of all the cameos. Because It's a Mad World have a bunch of cameos too. I don't know if there's a crossover, but just to mention one, the great Jamie Farr plays one of the apostles. He was so broken those days that he prayed to St. Jude to get the part, which is the patron saint of lost causes. And ironically, he played the apostle that was originally named Jude, but they changed his name to Thaddeus so it wouldn't be mixed up with Judas. How about that?
Yeah, that's the weird thing about reading scripture and even reading commentary about it is
Yeah.
I lost track of all the Marys.
Oh yeah.
It was until like last year that I didn't realize that Joseph of Arimathea and Joseph, Jesus's father, were two different people.
It's just you got to get in. You got to get deep, man. I get it.
Yeah.
Um, the one actress who played, I believe, Mary of someplace, Mary of Galilee. You know, there were
Mary
Mary
Magdalene?
Magdalene, Mary the mother of Jesus, and Mary of Bethany, I believe. And her name is Janet Margolin, a very distinctive looking actor who I guess proclaimed the resurrection. I can't really remember what, but her face is so beautiful, and all the women were very beautiful playing the parts surrounding and supporting Jesus. So yeah, but Janet Margolin was so radiant. And it's a extreme close up in that 70 millimeter that I was watching. So anyway,
Well, I don't know much about George Stevens as a director, but that was definitely something that he focused on. Is a lot of the men in the movie, aside like Jesus, got almost the same beatific treatment as the women. A lot of
yeah,
great adoring kind of
yeah.
close-ups, very clean, very bright. Whereas a lot of the other, the environs that they were kind of walking around, and I think this is to show the contrast of like this is the new way, the new light of the world was shining it on the kind of filth and the
Oh
gruffness.
my
I mean,
God.
even the Roman soldiers, like we mentioned Telly Savalas as Pontius Pilate. It's not
Who
like
loves you, Jesus?
pristine. Yeah, it's not pristine, shining armor and flowing robes. It's all kind of like dusty and worn looking. It's a very interesting choice.
Well, I completely forgot my point after I said "Who loves you, Jesus?" because I said that every time Savalas appeared on screen. Kojak playing Pontius Pilate. One of the things I read in the trivia is that everybody assumes he has shaved his head for that role, but it was actually another role in a smaller film, and he decided never to. He was a very early adopter of shaving his head, and it became his symbol. So there you go.
I don't know if I'm not sure if I've ever seen Telly Savalas with hair.
No, well, there's some early roles that he did where he has the fringe because he was always bald, as those of us who shave their head do. You're always bald.
Talk about shining a light.
There you go. But I know what I wanted to say. His haircut. It says, "I am an androgynous Jesus." His haircut was odd, wasn't it? Usually he has the flowing locks, but this time he had sort of a modified, I don't know, if he had swept his hair over his forehead, he would look like a beetle. Yeah.
Yeah. And
it was a very androgynous haircut.
It was kind of a bob in the back. Yeah. I was not ready for that either, especially when.
No, I wasn't.
Yeah, at towards the end, particularly when he has his feet washed and he's kind of anointed with the oils, and she kind of does him up for his trip down that final road. He did look, there was something very striking about it.
Yeah, it was compelling. It was a compelling look for him, and with the Swedish von Sydow. When the resurrection occurred, I said, "Old Blue Eyes is back."
There's a different Old Blue Eyes, I think. Oh my gosh. Can you imagine Frank Sinatra as Jesus?
Yeah, baby, let's swing.
Oh, okay. I'll do you one better. Frank Sinatra as Jesus in a scene with Telly Savalas as Pontius Pilate.
Oh my God. Too bad SCTV isn't around because I would be calling them right now.
Let me ask you this. Well, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was, I wrote down a lot of notes because it was such an amazing journey to watch this film, by the way. And I did it in parts. I'm sure you did it in parts as well. I kind of did an hour at a time over 3 days. And at one point I was on the L watching it because I just, this is, as you have
Oh
to
yeah.
put every schedule to the minute on things like this. So, some of the best scenes were on my iPhone in the L while I was delayed. But one of the things I wrote down is Stevens used George Stevens, by the way, a classic Hollywood studio system director. He was profiled in Five Came Back when he went to World War II and made, a lot of history with him. But he also made A Place in the Sun and Giant, which both won the Best Director, Woman of the Year. He was in his 60s when he did Greatest Story Ever Told. He only made one more film. So anyway, he's an epic guy. But he kept using crosses throughout the film as symbolisms. It was quite extraordinary. And for him, who went through the studio system, for him to do something this big was very fascinating to me. I mean, it's so huge. It's on the David Lean level, the complete epic,
Well, I mean, you mentioned Giant, which is, I mean,
Yeah.
I think
There you go.
I haven't seen that in a long time, and I forgot who directed it, honestly. But yeah, that's
Right.
another sprawling,
Yeah.
kind of societal epic journey in its own right. So that makes a lot of sense. And it makes me want to go back and watch this one in its full full HD 70 millimeter glory.
Its cinematography is spectacular. And I heard the cinematographer die of a heart attack on set. So he had to bring in the guy he used for Shane, another great George Stevens movie, to complete it, I guess. There was unbelievable. Now, I want to bring up something. One more thing about Telly Savalas, Who Loves You, Jesus, is that they were coming in. First of all, there's so many things. His staff was just a potpourri of stars. Victor Borno, Martin Landau, all these. Claude Rains played the original Herod. I mean, these cameos were freaking me out. But at one point, the priests come in and they say, well, he cured blindness in a man. He cured leprosy in a man. He walked on water. And at that point, Savalas goes, as Pontius, get out!
Yeah.
And I'm like, walking on water was the bridge too far. I mean, curing a man of blindness and leprosy, no.
Well, it's strange because I know the scene you're talking about. He delivered a little bit differently, and that's what was confusing because when he said "get out," it sounded kind of like the casual, like "get out of here," like he didn't believe it. But I think it was that, and no, you need to leave. It was very odd.
And also, it reminded me of the old thing whenever a Hollywood producer's pitch something and he doesn't like it, get out of my office. So that's what it reminded me.
Well, I got to say, like, in addition to the performances, because I think von Sydow was great.
Oh, he was fantastic.
But I think and again, I'm not sure if this is the edit or what, but seeing him just kind of pop up as the adult Jesus, he's a little bit more mystical than man. And I think that part of this is just my own experience. I just this morning finished reading this giant book, which I highly recommend, called Jesus, A Pilgrimage. And it's about a couple of Jesuits who go over to the Holy Land and they retrace the steps of Jesus's life, and they talk about scripture and all this other stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah, but they talk more about what it would have been like to be the human side of Christ, kind of experiencing the world and interacting with people and how they would have perceived him back in that time. And so I guess I wasn't prepared for this level of remove. It feels like only intermittently does he kind of come down and interact with people on a more human level. He's spouting a lot. He's, telling allegorical stories, which is, true to form, but there was such a contrast between him and everybody else that I don't know. There was something, and maybe it's the act.
There was less humanity and more symbolism, or more, grandeur, I guess.
Which, I mean, to bring it back to, I mean, some of the things we've talked about with Jesus Christ Superstar, even and even Caviezel in the Passion of the Christ, I think possibly because these were later interpretations, 1965. This is a very kind of a buttoned up
Oh yeah.
production. It's
Yeah. Well, they're
yeah,
speaking the King's English. I'll say one thing about Mel Gibson. By doing it in the original language, it adds a lot more atmosphere and authenticity to it.
yeah,
Now, I look at The Greatest Story Ever Told as more of a parable. It's more of a fantastical retelling of it, with the greatest sets and the whitest costumes. Everybody was wearing white in the movie, which I found fascinating. Everybody, their makeup and their beards, everybody was trimmed and perfect. So it wasn't, to me, the uh, the kind of retelling you could have as Mel Gibson did it. And I had to tip my hat to old Mel, because it 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 does make a difference when it's in the original language and in the original atmosphere. So, but this is in the pantheon of Jesus movies. This is a player. This is so beautifully filmed, and so it was the equivalent budget of 220 million for the day.
right. Because it
Yeah.
had a budget, I think 20 million, right?
Yeah,
But they
25
yeah,
mil. So you just
wh-
multiply that by 10 now.
that's crazy.
Isn't
Um,
it? Isn't it?
But you're right. I mean, they filmed, in real locations. Some of it I couldn't tell what was set. Like the crucifixion scene at the end, it was weird because it looked not quite like a set, but also like they didn't quite film outdoors. And they did have,
Right.
I imagine it's a screen when they had the sky darkening with the storm and
Oh,
everything.
it's an
But
epic.
it's
The
it's
whole ending is amazing.
yeah, it looks pretty flawless. Even by today's standards, I think it's very believable. They did shy away from the violence of the crucifixion. I mean, you
Right.
see a lot of it in either a very distant wide shot or kind of extreme close-ups of Jesus's face. You don't get the brutality that
Right.
Gibson kind of indulged in. Um,
Well,
but
I'll
yeah,
say too, they were kind of using like art forms of the era, meaning that the artistic renderings of Jesus, as they start in the beginning of the film on that shot of, I guess the Sistine Chapel or something, excuse me, and then it was it was played more again to the fantastical side, the grandeur side, the artistic side. That's why I can accept this film so readily as one of the great Jesus films, because it's just so beautiful. It's beautiful.
I'm glad you brought up that painting because that's in the first. It bookends the movie perfectly.
Yeah, it's just amazing. Yes. And they
But
used von Sydow's figure as the figure of Christ in the beginning and ending painting, which is quite extraordinary.
it is, but here's the thing. Watching him act as Jesus, I can totally buy it. But
Mhm.
that painting, there was something about the likeness that was a little bit almost cartoonish. I was like, "Oh, that's just Max von Sydow as Jesus. That seems really strange." By the end of the movie, when it came back around, I was like, "Yeah, I get it." But that was a
Yeah,
jarring image for the first minute. I'm like, "What am I in
interesting.
for?"
Interesting. Especially on that 70 mil version, they played the whole soundtrack. They had the intermission card.
There was an intermi I missed the whole wow.
The intermission was right a tremendous scene too. Another stellar scene is when he raises Lazarus from the dead, and James the Lesser and the other guy are just running through the village proclaiming his glory. It's like a thrilling scene. Could you imagine being the messenger of the Messiah? And that's how Stevens played it. He's running, running, running. He has to tell everybody. He has to tell the Romans. He has to tell, you know, the Galileans. He has to tell the Phoenicians. I don't know. It was just everybody. And he pronounced it correctly when he was with the Phoenicians, because they were very particular about that. Anyway, that's what leads up to the intermission. I proclaim the glory. Intermission.
I think it's weird because I think wait, I didn't get an intermission card, but it's the one time I think the movie cut to black. It was very harsh, so that's probably what it was because
Right.
it was right around the scene you're describing.
And they go right into the passion play after that.
It's very interesting because there are moments when I really felt that 3-hour runtime because George
Yes.
Stevens Especially the beginning. It is very much like 2001: A Space Odyssey, where you're kind of waiting for the movie to get going. Like, how much more can I watch these apes figure out that they're going to use tools?
Right.
But I think it reminded me intermittently of like Terrence Malick, really caught up in the visual poetry and taking its time. At times it kind of broke up the action where I'm like, no, you're on a good roll here. Keep going.
Yeah.
But other times it was nice to just kind of, sit and appreciate. Yeah.
Very meditative. And especially, again, I will say, I will send you the link immediately, but watch it on the 70 mil version. You totally understand what he was trying to accomplish. I'm going to have to read some more background about the film because I'm so taken with Steven's obsession about doing this scale of a film. The scale is just off the charts. So you mentioned Giant. That was a movie where the scale was off the charts. So obviously he took what he learned from that film, and he didn't have James Dean to play Jesus, but he had Max von Sydow. Old Blue Eyes is back.
If only, can you imagine again? Well, James Dean would have been a little bit too old for that part
by that time. Yes, you're right.
Which is weird because I've always, Max von Sydow, of course, would do The Exorcist like 7 years later or whatever it was,
and he did a lot of Swedish films for Bergman beforehand.
Right, but like looking at this, I'm thinking he seems a little bit old to be playing Jesus, and I looked it up. He was 36 when he did it, so he's 36 playing 30 to 33. It kind of works out. I think he's one of those actors, and especially because we look back in history and people who are 20 look like they were 50, just a rough world.
Right.
But there was something jarring about seeing him there. I do want to
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just talking about some of the other casting because they made the men and women so beautiful. It was like James the Lesser, the younger guy. He was almost like a teenager. He was played by Michael Anderson Jr. Maybe who went on to become a famous hippie. I don't know. But Jamie Farr too. It just blew my mind that they kept panning during the Last Supper scene, and there he is, Jamie Farr. I said that has to be him. It's Klinger. Klinger's an apostle. But anyway, I just had to mention that because you're right. Everybody, the serious nature of this film is infiltrated by these younger, kind of hot actors, hot in looks, both men and women.
Oh my gosh! I just realized this. I'm looking at the IMDb.
Mm-hmm.
Pat Boone was the angel at the tomb.
Yes, and I didn't notice that when I was watching the film. I almost want to go back since it's toward the end. I can find it readily, just to see, old Pat.
Okay,
who's still alive, by the way. So is
Pat,
Jamie Farr.
Pat, I almost can't believe this because I hadn't looked up the IMDb of who all was in this damn movie.
Yes, oh my
until
God.
now. Okay, look, we talked about Giant and the James Dean connection. Sal Mineo was in this thing.
Sal Mineo playing who?
Araya. I don't know who that was. In the picture, he looks like Ralph Macchio. But I do want to say that the actor who played Judas Iscariot, David McCallum, in this movie in particular, he looked like Christopher Nolan. I expected him to have like a 3-piece suit on or something. And
I just can't believe he was doing the Man from U.N.C.L.E. and played Judas. That blows my mind. In the day when people didn't cross over, but he was also a British actor, kind of off the grid. Martin Landau as Caiaphas, Roddy McDowell as Matthew the tax collector, Claude Rains as Harold the Great. He starts the movie. I mean, the cast is mind-blowing.
Hey, can you tell me where she's credited here? Mm-hmm. Where was Angela Lansbury as Claudia? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I have the Wikipedia entry, and all they did was just talk about who else was in the film, and Carol Baker, Russell Johnson, Russell Johnson, the professor from Gilligan's Island. Are you kidding me?
For like a split second, I saw him, and then you've also got Victor Bono, who's King Tut from the Batman TV show.
He has a bigger role. He's sort of one of the priests, right?
Yes, one of the accusers from early
Yeah.
on who was like, "Who is this guy?" And he's a threat to us. I
He has
do
a
want to
great
talk.
close up at one point. He has such a distinctive face.
He's got a couple of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do want to talk about Donald Pleasance, who I mentioned
Yeah. It's the
as
devil.
the devil, a portrayal that I don't think I've seen before. Just as a regular guy who's kind of like he keeps popping up. We first meet him during the temptation, kind of on the mountain, and he's just like,
Right.
hey, come come hang out.
Yeah.
What if I could make it so you had all of this? This could all be yours. Very casual. And then as he pops up later, particularly at the, during the passion and during the trials, he's just kind
Yeah.
of a face in the crowd and
Right.
he's watching to see what's going on with
Right.
almost a mixture of sadness. It's not the glee that you would think, perhaps because I've read interpretations of what Satan might have been thinking at this point, which is not, hey, this is my enemy and his son is getting, about to get executed. It's, oh no, this is the fulfillment of the prophecy and I'm in big trouble.
Hmm.
And I think Pleasance kind of plays into that because it's a very interesting choice that he with some of his expressions.
Well, uh, I thought an extraordinary scene at the end. And again, I never think of George Stevens as some sort of genius filmmaker. I always think of him as a kind of a working man director. He made good films, he made great films, he did other types of films, but this I thought was awesome. When he was going through the crucifixion, the nailing of his hands, the whole, putting his cross up, he kept intercutting to von Sydow in sort of a stadium with a pit of fire. And when the first nail goes into Jesus's hand, his character falls into that pit of fire. This is not a spoiler alert. It's just a
No,
kind of a
that was Judas. Yeah.
Judas falling in the pit of fire. It wasn't Jesus.
No, that was Judas, and it was a
Okay, it was
deviation
it
from
was a
scripture
long
because
shot, and I wasn't sure.
right, because what the that opens with Judas throwing his 30 pieces of silver
Mhm.
at the building, and then classically it's been interpreted as he hung himself out of guilt. But
Right,
in this version, there is a giant pyre in the middle of this empty square, which is
right.
just again more visual poetry.
Yes,
That he throws
yes.
himself into the fire and he's all alone. There's nobody around. He's completely isolated, and it's a powerful moment that I wasn't expecting. Yeah.
Right, and it was better that that's Judas than Jesus, and that's why my earlier point about Stevens, I don't consider him to be a cinematic man or a filmmaker, uh, but there was a powerful symbol, as you said, a powerful piece of, you know, uh, cutting back and forth between the crucifixion and Judas's sorrow.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I can't recommend this movie enough. It did take a
Yeah,
little bit to get going for me because I wasn't sure if I was in good hands. But by the end
right.
of it, it was one of the, I think, great portrayals of the man.
Yeah,
Specifically, there's a look that Jesus gives to Judas at the Last Supper, and it's in this version. I think it'll be better in 70 millimeter because I
right.
think I was watching
Wait
literally
till
a
you
pan
see
and scan
that
version
that
because at one point the camera pans over from Jesus here, and then Judas is off screen, but the camera does pan over, and you see him give him that look. And I can imagine that being in one shot and just like almost the cartoon stair lines dotting across to him,
sure.
like you know what you're about to do.
Right, right. God, there was something about that scene also. Well, a lot of it played out when the Passion Play like it was a non-singing version of Jesus Christ Superstar because there were so many parallels, right? But the one thing I wanted to mention before we end is the guy who played the old blind man was a comedian named Ed Wynn, and Ed Wynn was huge. He was like a superstar of the radio to television era. Keenan Wynn is his son, who also was a great character actor in film. But Ed Wynn, as the old blind man, was a really wild piece of casting. I must say, because he had a very silly thing. His routine was, I'm like this. I'm like, I think he's in a mad world too. I really do. As a comic, he was a comic. He had a character. It's hard to describe. Look him up. But
well, it's interesting that because I didn't know he was a comic actor, but it makes sense, particularly the last scene he's in, where he shows up and he just it's during the crucifixion, and everybody's standing around like all sad and stuff, and you see his head kind of pop up like, oh, what's going on here? What?
No, I cannot. I'm glad you brought this up, because one of the legends in Hollywood is the proclamation by the great John Wayne. Surely this guy is the Son of God. And I'd heard about it for years. I'd never seen it. And it was spectacular. He is, especially in the 70 mil, he is in the middle of this enormous scene. The storms are going on. He's dressed in this Roman garb. He's obviously too fat for, and he proclaims that line, and it is epic. It was like everything I ever thought it would be. The story is, Stephen said to him, look more like you're in awe. So he goes, oh, surely this man's the Son of God. But no, it was spectacular. It was the only guy who could proclaim this line forever.
Well, it's fascinating, because that was John Wayne, and
John Wayne.
This is like the precursor to Brando showing up in Superman for 10 minutes, because I read that John Wayne got paid $250,000 for this part. And I was like, he's literally on screen for a minute and he's got one thing to say.
Yes. And when they were doing the pre-pro for it, I read this in IMDb, that they actually put Wayne's picture on, and Coming, the greatest story ever told with John Wayne, 4 years before they went into production. You know how Variety is, where they put those ads in. Isn't that crazy? I mean, the whole legend of this film, I'm praying that somebody wrote a book, somebody wrote a book about this whole process, because I'm going to seek it out, because I have to know everything about this movie now. I really do. It's again, in the pantheon of Jesus movies, it's a must see. And that's all I have to say. 5 out of 5 for me.
Yes, I'll give it a 5 out of 5 as well. And I am happy to, on this Good Friday, proclaim the good news that this movie is worth watching and very entertaining.
Yes. It's not a Good Friday. It's a great Friday, as I said.
Yes, sir. He is risen. I want to just conclude this by, again, saying Pat McDonald of HollywoodChicago.com. I didn't introduce you, partially because, hopefully unbeknownst to everyone, we've had a lot of technical difficulties.
But we got through it, which is beautiful.
We did. Yes, but I just want to say again, thank you. I know we do a Christmas show, we do an Easter show, and I do want to share my appreciation that we talk about these wonderful films that explore kind of faith journeys in various different ways. It's not like we're talking about the same movies over and over again. There's all something unique.
And also, too, with my mom passing in February and her great faith, her great Catholic faith, to me, it's an exploration of spirituality that I really, really needed. And I have to say that, I have to dedicate this discussion to her, because for better, for worse, that's my life. And I've gone through my own spiritual journey, but I can only view this as something that marries my love of cinema with my DNA Catholic aspect to my life. So thanks, Mom.
Well, yes, I'm going to say thank you, Mom, too, although it's kind of awkward because she wasn't my mom, but she was yours, which makes her, by default, a great woman.
Blessings.
All right, Pat, take care. We'll catch you at some point soon. And folks out there, thank you for hanging out. And if you like this show, please like, subscribe, and all that business. And until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thanks much. Take care. And as Pat said,
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter and blessings. Take care. Hey everyone, Ian here. I know, long time no see. But if you like the video you just watched, feel free to subscribe to Kicking the Seat right here, and also check out the playlist and recommended video right here. Thanks for watching.